Yeah, welcome back to the conversation on News Central Television. It's now time for us to switch gears to Egypt, where President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa joined a significant peace summit in Cairo, led by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El Sisi, to address the Israeli-Gaza conflict. He expressed grave concern over the suffering of civilians, the humanitarian crisis, and the displacement of people in Gaza. President Ramaphosa called for an immediate cessation of hostilities, the release of hostages, and the lifting of the Gaza siege, urging for humanitarian aid and a United Nations-led negotiation process to resolving the conflict. Drawing parallels to South Africa's history, he emphasized that peace is the only path forward and urged all parties to exercise restraints to prevent further escalation. In this context, the international community, he says, must play a pivotal role in supporting peace, creating conditions for dialogue, and finding sustainable solutions. President Ramaphosa underscored the importance of fulfilling the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people while ensuring the security of Israel. It's imperative that the world calls for ceasefire, advocates for peace, justice, and human rights for all, and work towards a just and lasting resolution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, joining me for this discussion is Nasasira Mark, African Affairs Analyst, who joins us from the Ugandan capital, Kampala. One welcome to you, Mark, and thanks for joining us on the program.
Glad to be here.
Now, Mark, let's talk about the President of South Africa attending this peace summit in Cairo to discuss the Israeli-Gaza conflict. What significance does this hold in the context of international diplomacy and conflict resolution efforts?
Well, it is important for Africa and for South Africa because it puts South Africa on the map and pushes its foreign policy agenda. And it's important for Africa as well to take part in conversations that shape the political discourse of our day, because previously we have not had a chance to take part in such conversations. But as to how far South Africa will be able to go, I think in this one they've gone in already biased to showing side because of their past relationship with Palestine. And I hope that we are able to have roots out of this conversation. But it is important and it is very good that South Africa is taking part in this conversation and trying to find a peaceful solution for this conflict. But more to that, for me, is the genesis and how this whole episode has unfolded and how it's unfolded, because it's important that we put the things in perspective. So for me, I think most people starting this conversation from where Israel or Palestine is attacking Israel, and I feel like it is lost in between there when we do not get to understand the real cause of what is going on. And I think in January, the airstrikes, the drone strikes that took out the military facilities of Iran, that event then was the trigger of this episode that we are having. So Iran went into Palestine and used Palestine to attack Israel, and Israel had to retaliate. So it is important that we know that this is a conversation that starts in Iran, comes to Palestine and to Israel. So then we can have a proper conversation. But it is important, like you asked, for South Africa and for President Ramaphosa to engage in this conversation and try to push, like he tried with Ukraine and Russia. It is important and it's good for us.
Now, staying with you, Mark, since this conflict broke out a few weeks ago, the conflict between Israel and Gaza, we've seen a divided response from African nations. If you read the African Union statement, it did mention the root cause. It did talk about the Palestinian struggle and the occupation, but other countries, for example, the Kenyan president's statement was almost a copy and paste from the White House. Why is Africa as a continent divided, even though the African Union has an official position on this conflict? What are the causes of this division?
I first of all do not think that really this particular episode is as a result of Palestine, Gaza, if you'd like to put it, fighting for the rights in the West Bank and fighting the occupation, the Israel occupation force. No, I think this particular one was instigated and is a fight by Iran. Iran is trying to get even for the strikes, the drone strikes against their nuclear development facility and their weapon development facility that Israel carried out early in January or at the end of January, thereabouts. And so it's not really about the fight. So Iran has decided to do what the Western powers did with Ukraine to fight Russia. Now they're using, Iran has.
Hello, Mark, are you there? Okay, we seem to be having some connection issues with Mark. If you're just joining us, this is the conversation, and we're currently discussing the peace summit that was held in Egypt, hosted by Egyptian President El Sisi, looking at preferring solutions to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. In this conflict that broke out about 3 weeks ago, on the 7th of October, when Hamas militants attacked houses and killed so many innocent people in southern Israel. We hope to reconnect with Mark Nasasira, analyst who's joining us from Kampala, Uganda. We'll go on a quick break. We'll return as soon as we establish connection with Mark. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the conversation in News Central Television. If you're just joining, we've been discussing the Israeli and Gaza conflict and the peace summit that was held in Cairo, Egypt over the weekend. And we have on this discussion Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast and also Nasasira Mark, and political affairs analyst who's joining us from Uganda. One welcome to you, Dr. Breakfast, and thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Dr. Breakfast, the President of the Republic of South Africa, while speaking in Cairo, Egypt during this summit, drew parallels between the South African struggle against apartheid and the Palestinian situation. Can you provide a nuanced analysis of this historical comparisons and their relevance in the current context? And why is South Africa very vocal when it comes to speaking against the occupation and for the Palestinian cause?
Well, South Africa has a long-standing relationship with Palestine because of similarities. As you know, South Africa was also under the yoke of apartheid, whereby the violation of human rights of the majority was the order of the day. So I think that's the first similarity. But also I think the people of Palestine, they also supported the African National Congress when it was in the trenches. But also when you look at our foreign policy is underpinned by human rights, democracy, rule of law, and security and stability.
Hello, Dr. Breakfast. Just to confirm your audio, are you there? Okay, I'll try to get back to Dr. Breakfast. Now, Mark, are you there? Hello, Mark Nasasira, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Now, Mark, before we get back to Dr. Breakfast, the 1967 borders is crucial. President Ramaphosa mentioned it in his speech in Cairo. How do these borders impact the current negotiations and the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict? We've often heard analysts tout the two-state solution. Is it possible, looking at the history and the antecedents of Israel and Palestine over the years, to still return to this 1967 borders?
No, I do not think it's possible. I do not think that we can go back to those borders as they were then, because is look, what we have right now is on both sides we have extremists, we have hardliners on both sides, and rightly so, for Israel, there is a threat. Iran has come out, for example, to say that their mission is to make sure that they wipe to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Some voices have come out to say that. And so that makes it very hard to go back to those borders. But also that, Palestine or Gaza has been hijacked by extremists that are using that space to create havoc. So it is very important, in my view, that you would get to this two-state solution where
Apologies, we seem to have lost connection with Mark. Now, Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast, I believe you're back. Now, I'll let you complete your thoughts in giving us a historical overview of South African, Palestinian, and Palestine's relationship.
I can't remember where I was. Suffice to say, there are similarities in terms of human rights abuses because the majority of the people of South Africa were under the yoke of apartheid and were dominated by a tiny minority of people. In the same way, the people of Palestine also feel that their land has been invaded by Israel. So I think those are the similarities, but also the African National Congress, when it was in the trenches, it was supported by people of Palestine. So the ANC as a liberation movement has a long-standing relationship with the people of Palestine. No wonder it has pledged solidarity with the people of Palestine. But interestingly, if you look at our foreign policy, with regard to the war that has broken out between Russia and Ukraine, we maintain a policy of neutrality, or we maintain a policy of non-alignment. But with regard to the tension between Palestine and Israel, we've got a specific position. I think maybe that is due to the fact that it's a matter which is close to the hearts of many members of the African National Congress because of its historical context.
Now, stay with you, Dr. Breakfast. President Cyril Ramaphosa called for a ceasefire while speaking at this peace summit in Cairo. He also called for the lifting of Gaza's siege and the creation of humanitarian corridors. But what we've seen, he's also called for de-escalation of the conflict. The last United States-sponsored resolution at the United Nations Security Council did not call for de-escalation of the conflict. And we've seen 20 trucks were allowed into Gaza from the Rafah crossing, and human rights organizations and those on the ground said, it's a tiny drop in the ocean. So why, and also last week, South Africa's Foreign Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor, did speak to the leader of Hamas to discuss terms for ceasefire and also the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Why do we see that? Why are we seeing that nations that pride themselves as, beacons of human rights and humanity are now not, they're the ones that are not even calling for ceasefire or for Israel to halt its carpet bombing and the war crimes that have been recorded in Gaza so far? And do you think with South Africa's efforts, we might see a possible de-escalation in the conflict, or is this an uphill task looking at nations, European nations, America, that should normally be calling for this sort of situations? And we've seen this in the recent past in Ukraine, how they were condemning Russia for, weaponizing fuel and also supplies and electricity. But we're not getting the same type of condemnation in this situation in Gaza.
For sure. First of all, you've raised two issues. The first point that you've made was the perpetual silence of the US and the failure of the UN in de-escalating the magnitude of the conflict there. Then you've raised the conversation between Minister Pando and Hamas. So I'll start with the first point that you made. The reason why the US has taken a position is because it sympathizes with Israel. It sympathizes with other Western countries. So it believes that Hamas is a security threat. Hamas is posing a danger to the stability of that region. And I'm not talking about the rightness or the wrongness of that. But also, I think the UN has let us down in the sense that, if you look at the Security Council, one of the responsibilities of that organ is to promote peace and stability, but it has not done that. Why? Because America is a large financial contributor to the UN. That's why the UN cannot discipline the US when it does as it pleases. So that seems to be the problem. So America has taken a particular position to support Israel. They think that Hamas is leading a political onslaught against the people of Israel. No wonder they are siding with them. But on the other hand, President Ramaphosa, his office has denied the conversation between Minister Pando and Hamas. But I think also our foreign policy, sometimes I feel like it is catching up with us because we want to be all things to all people. We want to support Hamas, we want to support the people of Palestine, but also we want to maintain our
relationship with the West,
the US and other Western countries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Breakfast. I'm not sure if we still have Mark. Okay, Mark. Now, as we wrap up the conversation, President Ramaphosa's speech called for United Nations-led negotiation process. What specific role can the United Nations play? Is it still relevant looking at the role of the big fives in the United Nations Security Council and the threat of veto power, which we've seen used several times as this conflict broke out? Do you think the United Nations still has a role to play in facilitating negotiations and ensuring a peaceful resolution to this conflict?
No, I do not think so. I think the days for the United Nations Security Council in particular are pretty much gone. We need to have a better conversation on how to handle bigger crises. It seems these are getting out of hand for the Security Council. Because look, the Security Council itself is a tool of hegemony. It's a tool of the colonial masters or the imperialists, so to speak. The fact that itself, the composition of the Security Council itself is questionable, is questioned in many spheres, especially for Africa, that Africa has no permanent seat at the Security Council is a problem itself. So no, I do not think that the Security Council has answers to the conflict. And of course, America clearly is in line in support with Israel. And for that reason, you can be sure that for example, Hamas or Palestine will not be comfortable with the position that America will take. And for that reason, America has veto power for any decision that can be taken in the Security Council. So I do not think
it's a very complex situation. Yeah. I wish we could go on. 30 minutes is not enough to go through all the issues regarding this conflict and our discussion, but we've done our best. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Dr. Ntsikelelo, Breakfast, political affairs analyst, joining from the Eastern Cape in South Africa, and also Nasasira Mark, African affairs analyst, who joined from Kampala in Uganda. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. We do appreciate your contribution. Thank you.